If you haven't been out to the project, I highly recommend going out there. They have moved mountains, and it's extremely impressive. I remember when the project was, well, it's been, like John said, 30 years, and I didn't understand how they were going to put in a community with the terrain that they have. Go out there and see. They literally moved mountains. It's very impressive. So let's jump into our commercial. I think this photo best represents 2024, and it also made me question my career choices. When a crypto guy paid $6.2 million for a banana taped to canvas. I think that's where we got, yes. Well, technically it was only $5.2 million. There was a $1 million auction fee. The absurdity of the market and how people try to spend money. 2024 was no exception. The commercial real estate market did have a slump, but it's not just been in 2024, it's been over the last couple of years, which I'll go into a little bit. Yes, the Fed did cut rates, but it really didn't have much of an impact on commercial lending. Cap rates are still lagging behind borrowing costs. Borrowing costs have increased quite a bit. However, the cap rates have only adjusted slightly. Over the last, let's say, 2.5 years, we've only seen about 150 basis points adjustment in cap rates. However, we've seen borrowing costs go up 250 to 300 basis points. So I'll have a graph in a little bit. I'll talk about that gap that's narrowed. The industrial sector, I mean, that's one of the highlights that we're going to be talking about today. As you've heard in a couple presentations, not only with Hesperia, Victorville, and Apple Valley, but we also have Barstow and Adelanto to come, which we'll also talk about. Incredible industrial. Multifamily has had affordability challenges. We've had the price of multifamily per unit go up tremendously. Jared Schendel will be coming on stage to talk about those challenges that we've had. Rents have been stagnant over the last 18 months. And regulatory and legislative challenges. I will not get on a soapbox because I will be here for 2 hours complaining about Sacramento. By the time I get off the stage, there will be 2 to 3 more proposed laws in the commercial sector, the residential sector, about controlling rents, who we have to rent to, how we have to give notices, how we can't evict anyone. These are constant challenges. And of course, split roll tax, I believe, will come back to the front and center of that discussion in the coming year. And the presidential election, what a nightmare last year. I don't care what side of the aisle you were on, everyone was polarized and everyone did nothing. I literally had clients, both Democrats and Republicans, saying we are not doing anything until the election's done. After the election was done, I called them and said, well, we're still not doing anything. We want to wait to see what happens. You can't win. So interesting times. So I shortened the graph. I used to come up with a 20-year, 22-year graph of the cycles, and quite frankly, I got tired of looking at the Great Recession, so I just eliminated it. And that is a thing of our past, which I'll talk about in a minute. However, if you can look from 21 was our banner year. Go figure, COVID. Incredible market, both from land, commercial, and a multifamily. But we've had a slight decline every single year, and I'll get into the most recent decline. But the thing that really affected late 22 and especially 23 and 24 were interest rates. So this is activity by sector: office, retail, industrial, multifamily, and land. Office sales were down 12% for the year over year. Retail down slightly at 2.4%. Industrial was down 87.8%. That was a tremendous drop. Now, that sounds like a big number, but in 2023, we sold a 1 million square foot industrial building in the Valley. When you sell a building for over $100 million, that tends to skew the numbers a little bit. However, with that said, if we remove it out, we're still down over 54% on the industrial transactions. Multifamily actually increased 23.1%. I'm not going to steal Jared's thunder. He'll explain why we were actually up last year. And in land. Land was up 17.8% year over year. However, that was affected by one sale, and I'll get to that in a minute. Total land and commercial sales were $625 million last year versus $866 million in 23. $266 million of that was just commercial. It was a 52.6% decline year over year. Land sales, $328 million. However, when adjusted for the single sale of $162 million for 195 acres for an Amazon distribution center, we actually had a 35% decline in land sales. Land accounted for 57.4% of our total volume. We are still a land-driven region. We have it, unlike most of Southern California. Large format industrial development still continued to grab the headlines and expansion in our area. And vacancy rates increased both in retail, industrial, and also multifamily. And speculative development remains either build-to-suit, primarily in retail, with very little building in the office sector. So the office market has been phenomenal in the high desert, and mainly because we haven't built any office space in years other than build-to-suit government buildings. Vacancy rate actually fell from 2.8 to 2.1% last year. Lease rates shot up to $1.59 per square foot, and we absorbed 57,000 square feet of available space. The price per square foot also rose to $176 per square foot. This graph indicates the vacancy rate and also the ask rate per dollars. As you can see, over the last 8 years, we've had a steady decline in the vacancy rate, which is also relative to the limited new product that's come onto the market. And we did have a slight easing in 23 of the lease rates, but they did increase in 24 slightly. We're down to about 116,000 square feet of available space. A lot of it is functionally obsolete. Very tight market in the office, but there is a spread between the cost of new construction and where the lease rates are, and it just doesn't justify speculative building at this point. Sales volume declined slightly, 12% year over year, which I did cover earlier, $23.5 million. The high desert office space is isolated from downsizing. That's a weird term. Most of our office space is 2,500 square feet to 5,000 square feet. We do have some large users at the 10 and 15,000, but most of it is what we refer to as a mom and pop. If you listen to the news, the office sector is the worst sector to absolutely invest in. Stay at home, teams, work from home, shrinking office space. If I was in LA, especially Washington, D.C., I'd be extremely concerned because you have tenants that take 200, 400, 500,000 square feet. When they vacate, it's a serious issue. If you looked in San Francisco, Salesforce, in fact, they have a building that is completely empty that they had built out for them. They decided not to occupy. Fortunately or unfortunately, we don't have those large employers like Quicken or State Farm that have their corporate offices here, but it also insulates us to the market. Another interesting fact is the GSA, the Government Services Administration, is the single largest tenant in the United States. With 150 million square feet of space, they are 5 times larger than the next office user. If right now, and not getting political, wherever you are, DOGE is focused on reduction expenses. If you're sitting on office space in Washington, D.C., New York, San Francisco, L.A., Dallas, I would be very concerned. But we have 2.1% occupancy, or vacancy factor, We have a very strong office market. A couple quick sales. Interestingly, this was reported a 12.6 cap rate, which is a little inflated. We believe it traded closer to an 8 cap rate. $145 a square foot, 35,000 square foot facility on Amargosa in Victorville. Beautiful building, mixed use. And another sale, which is a medical use in Apple Valley, $1.8 million for 9,000 square feet, 6.5% cap rate. We had very little sales last year of commercial buildings. Those were the top 2 sales in the valley. Retail slid a little bit, lots of red. 7.1% vacancy. The vacancy rates almost increased 200 basis points. Lease rates fell, pretty obvious. Vacancies goes up, rates go down to attract more tenants. Almost 500,000 negative square feet in absorption last year, and the price per square foot fell to $251. This graph talks, again, rental rates versus vacancy rates. You see the vacancy has increased year over year. Slightly in 2023 and significantly in 24. Lease rates, of course, came down. Interestingly, lease rates did decrease 11.5%, but most of it is focused in the neighborhood center. There was negative 418,000 square feet, but a bulk of that was in the neighborhood centers. The small centers that maybe have 5, 10 tenants, not the power centers that we see at Target or a Walmart center at. Interestingly, the vacancy rates in power centers increased to 6.1. It was only 10 basis points up, very minimal, but the vacancy rate in the neighborhood area is 15.1%. They lost almost 300,000 square feet of space last year. A lot of that, we believe, is obviously online services and also real income. We've had a lot of inflation. Income hasn't risen to the same rate as inflation, and that affects retail spending. It affects retail tenants. Again, a couple sales that we had. This was one of the larger retail sales last year. The Arrowhead Credit Union building on Amargosa, $5.1 million for an almost 12,000 square foot building, almost a 7% cap rate. That is a significant variance from 2022 and 23, where we were in the mid-5s. Again, on Hesperia Road and Bear Valley Road, the grocery outlet building, approximately 36,000 square feet, representing a 6.7 cap rate, traded for $5 million. The lowest cap rate sale last year was a single-tenant Panera building. It opened, a year and a half ago to great success. It's on Bear Valley Road, practically across the street from the college. It traded for almost $1,200 a square foot and a 5% cap rate. That was the most aggressive sale that we had in the market. And the Golden Corral. Golden Corral had been corralled up for about 3 years, been on the market for a long time. It finally traded. It started out at a 5.2 cap rate offering price. It ended at an 8% cap rate at $4 million. Okay, let's jump into land real quick. I had to have at least one graph that was 20 years worth of history, right? Obviously, 21 and 22 were phenomenal years in the land sales activity, both transactions and volume. Volume did increase in 24 over 23, and so did sales, as I'd mentioned earlier. But when we subtract a single sale, as you can see here, the cheapest piece of land that we sold in the desert is $1,000. Most expensive was almost $162 million for 195 acres. Sites on Phelan Road in Hesperia. It's going to house a 2.5 million square foot distribution center for Amazon. That did skew the market. When we removed that sale out, it's $197 million in sales. We were actually down year over year, but still we have a pretty good land market compared to even 5-6 years ago. The average time on market did increase significantly to 357 days on market. Land does take a longer period to sell than in most assets, and we had a total of 1,571 transactions in 2024. So in summary, it's still a solid market for land. Even though I talk about the transactions declining, sales volume declining slightly, we still have a strong market for industrial. As you've heard from a few of the city managers, and we have 2 more to come, it's about industrial development. Interestingly, if you go back only 7 years ago, we had about 19 million square feet of industrial space. We've pushed over 30 million square feet. We have another 31 million square feet in either in the entitlement phase, the construction phase, or ready to pull permit phase. That's a tremendous number. And to us, my gosh, we could be a 60 million square foot industrial market within 5 years. The opportunity, to put in comparison, there's almost 1 billion square feet of industrial space in the lower inland empire. We are growing, but we have so much more opportunity in the industrial sector. Scattered single-family lots did decrease 21.7%. Again, single-family scattered lots, this is mostly for the regional and smaller builders that grab lots throughout the valley and build speculative homes. We did see a decline in sales. It's mainly because the cost of those ready-to-build lots has increased quite a bit, and there's been some caution in that industry. So a couple quick sales. Surprise, $162 million for 195 acres in Hesperia. It represented $20.24 per square foot. I've had a lot of people trying to use this comp against raw land, but this is a shovel-ready price, entitled project. 2.5 million square foot Amazon center that they're moving forward on. And then we've had some residential activity. Richmond Homes purchased approximately 122 finished single-family lots, encompassing about 35 acres for a little under $13 million. And we also had D.R. Horton purchase approximately 264 entitled lots for $5.6 million, representing approximately $21,000 a lot. It is a lower price, and while it was not disclosed, I'm estimating that they had an option agreement to purchase the land that they finally exercised. And also, Kaiser Permanente purchased approximately 35 acres adjacent to their current facility on Escondido Road in Hesperia. They have said they have not announced what they're going to do, but you buy 35 acres next to an existing medical facility, I think they're going to expand. They have a beautiful facility in Hesperia. If you haven't been by it, it's absolutely gorgeous. Capital markets, investment properties. Earlier I talked about the gap between investment and also cap rates. Cap rates is the return on investment when you buy a property. If you buy a $1 million property, you expect a 6% return. It generates $60,000 a year. If you look back to the far left, which is 2013, all the way to about 2021, we had a nice gap between investment, meaning the 10-year bond, and also mortgage rates. However, as we got into late 22, and especially 23, 24, you see those convergence. And that's made investors reluctant. If you can put your money in a CD or at the bank and earn 4.5%, 5%, do you want to take the risk on a property that yields 6%? And this is some of the hesitation that we've seen in the investment market and the slowdown that we've seen over the last 2 years, is we have not seen cap rates rise to meet the pressures from debt service and also ulterior vehicles for investment. So we do anticipate cap rates to increase this year. The Fed has talked about possibly 2 reductions this year. We're not banking on it. In fact, every morning I wake up, it's always fresh news. In fact, which is interesting, because 6 weeks ago, we were talking about how the Fed stuck a soft landing. Well, that news is extremely old, because now we're talking about, is it a recession? Is it going to be hard? Is it going to be soft? What's going to happen? And it's extremely fluid. But until we have a gap between these lines, we will still see investment property sales a little bit lower. The gap has changed on cap rate distribution. 3 years ago, we were in the 4 and 5s for retail. Even office was in the low 6s. We've seen that shift across all asset classes. As you can see, a majority of our stuff is between 6 and 8% as far as cap rates. We did have a 20 basis point decline year over year. Sellers are still slow to adjust price. We still have the discussion, well, I remember in 2021, I said, absolutely. We could get 3% mortgages. Life was great, but we are not in that market anymore. So we have sellers reluctant to sell their asset because the cap rates have risen. And we have buyers, there's capital available. However, they're not deploying capital until they see a higher return on properties. Default rates. Default rates remain under 3%. If you watched the news 2 years ago, especially in the office sector, they expected massive defaults. As loans reset, they go from 3.5% up to 6%. They figured people would walk away from their properties. There's one saving grace. These people have a lot of equity in their properties. So defaults have been extremely low. We do expect cap rates to increase a little bit in 2025. I think to be a healthy investment market, we need to see cap rates increase approximately 100 basis points. So 2025, I'm going to let Chris Thornburg talk about economics and what he sees, and he's a better forecaster. He did forecast the recession, he forecasted a V recovery, so I'm going to stay in my lane, but I will talk to you about what we see on the real estate side. Industrial is still expanding. We have a little under 10 million square feet either in the final approval stage or under construction. You're going to hear about a little big project in Barstow in a few minutes. Housing inventory remains below a balanced market. And quickly, I want to talk about that. The county has reported that we have approximately 607,000 residents. Now, we haven't had a census done in a little bit, but the county is reporting in the high desert we have 600,000 residents. So if we take natural birth rates, even pushing aside light migration to our valley, if we have a 1% growth rate in our community, that's 6,000 people added to our community every year. There's a need for approximately 2,000 homes every single year. We're building 800, 900 to 1,000 homes a year. Very conservative. Where we got into trouble was in 2004, 5, and 6. We were building homes because we got free money. Anyone could get money. We forgot to ask a single question: who are going to buy the homes? We hit 5,400 homes on the market in 2007. Think about that. We were building 5,000 to 6,000 homes a year. We haven't built, other than 1 year, over 1,000 homes in the last 5 years. I call it very conservative, cautious growth, and I think it's one of the reasons why I'm kind of bullish on the high desert, which I'll go into in a minute. Interesting, Silverwood. We just heard of a great presentation. Silverwood is actually generating interest from outside of our region. The marketing that they've done are bringing people to the desert, which is, again, going to expand our services, our retail, and our growth. Cap rates do favor the high desert. If you're down by as we call it, the ocean markets, Cap rates are up to 200 basis points lower than the high desert. Meaning if you're looking for an investment, do you invest in Newport or do you come to the desert? If you can get 2% more on your money, that's what makes us attractive. We have one of the most affordable housing markets in California, as Chris went over, and I think that lends to our future growth. And I talked about this a few years ago. I dusted off some old notes. I think it's time we become our own MSA. And what defines an MSA is an economic hub. And we've always been a bedroom community. We've always been a commuter community. We have over 35% of the jobs are commuted to over 30 minutes or longer. I think with the job growth that we're faced, also with the community coming together as an economic hub, I don't want to be called the Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario MSA. I want to be called the High Desert MSA or the Mojave River MSA. So, okay, that was my soapbox. I'll get off that for a second. Consumer confidence is slowing. Depends which morning I wake up, turn on the news, and I can get depressed or excited or I laugh. Recession, well, there's a lot of talk about the recession. I'll talk about what I think in the high desert. I think we're insulated. I'm going to be careful and put an asterisk next to that. We have a lot of growth. You're going to hear about the big project in Barstow. We've got a lot of industrial development. We have housing growth. We've had retail growth in the desert. And I believe because we haven't overbuilt like we did in the prior cycle, I think we're in a more insulated position today. There's going to be a decline in federal spending. I don't think it's going to affect our market like it will other markets, like I mentioned, D.C. And interesting, I put the item in red and I changed the year. I had this in my PowerPoint last year. Increased taxation to backfill state budget. As I was driving this morning, they were talking about how the state needs to raise $3 billion to stay in business next month. They're coming after us for more taxation. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a split roll property tax introduced in 2025. So that's another item that could affect commercial real estate. So forecast for 25, new housing starts to continue, I think at the same pace. Multifamily development is slowing, mainly because rents have been stagnant for the last 18 months. Industrial development to continue, retail sector to remain sluggish, primarily in the neighborhood centers, with the exception of new to market. Services and goods that we haven't had in this market that we've had to travel, as we say, down the hill to serve. Office sector to remain tight, no new inventory, and I think jobs. One of the things that is constant about everything we've talked about is from the industrial development, from the big project, to retail development, it creates jobs, and I think that's why we have a strong economy in the high desert.